Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome back into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. If you're not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Turn on all of your notifications so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. I am here each week to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news. And on today's episode of The Process, I have a lot to get to. We have a jam-packed show in front of us as a lot has happened over the last couple of days when it comes to the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting efforts, and I am going to get to all of that on today's show, starting with the Crimson Tide being included in a top 5 released by 2022 4-star defensive lineman Curtis Perry out of Pike Road High School in Pike Road, Alabama. Perry released his top 5 on Friday, included the Crimson Tide, UCF, Auburn, Clemson in his top 5. Auburn is a school to watch out for here along with the Crimson Tide. He has a lot of ties to the Auburn program. Clemson is another program I will keep my eyes on when it comes to Perry's recruitment as well, because Clemson is a late offer for him, and with him including them in his top 5, it means that he is going to take another look at the Clemson program moving forward in this recruitment. Texas is also included in his top 5 as we see Steve Sarkisian in the coaching staff with the Longhorns trying to create a national recruiting database, trying to keep their national appeal as they are going to continue to push for prospects inside the state of Alabama as they were included in that top 5 released by Curtis Perry. At the moment, I still feel that the Crimson Tide are in the best position to land the 4-star defensive lineman. A couple of the Crimson Tide's 2022 commits, in-state guys, were selected to play in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game recently. That game will take place in Mississippi this year in the month of December. One player who was committed to the Crimson Tide in 2022 recruiting class will represent the state of Mississippi, and he is Jaheim Otis. A plethora of guys from inside the state will represent the state of Alabama who are Alabama commits. When you take a look at guys like Jeremiah Alexander, Emmanuel Henderson, the Crimson Tide's latest commit in 2022 recruiting class, Traquan Fegans. You also take a look at Kobe Prentice. All of those guys are slated to play in this year's game. Curtis Perry will also play in the game as well. He is considered an Alabama target at the moment, but he will be included on that Alabama roster. It will be interesting to see which of those guys actually play in the game, because we have seen in the past a lot of high-ranked recruits choose to skip that game, go on to play some of the more national games. When you take a look at the Under Armour game and the All-American Bowl, so that is something to watch out with those guys being selected to play in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game this year. Be sure to check out our full story on which Alabama commits were selected to play in this year's event over at touchdowналabama.com. Perfect time to pick up your subscription to Touchdown Alabama as well. But now I am going to transition to all of the things I wanted to talk about on today's show, and there is a lot to talk about, starting with Ed Orgeron choosing to part ways, well, him and the LSU football program choosing to part ways at the end of the football season. This could be huge for the Crimson Tide's recruiting efforts moving forward. There are a couple of prospects to pay close attention to now that the LSU head coach will not be on their coaching staff at the end of this season. I actually wrote an article recently breaking down in great detail which players to pay attention to. Be sure to check out that article over at touchdownalabama.com, but I will list a couple of guys here on today's show. One of those guys is a former Alabama commit and 4-star running back, Le'Veon Moss. The Crimson Tide want to add 2 running backs in their 2022 recruiting class that currently have a commitment from 1- and 5-star running back Emmanuel Henderson. They are still chasing after another guy. Moss could once again be that guy for the Crimson Tide here in this 2022 recruiting class. Another guy is Aaron Anderson, a former LSU commit, actually decommitted from the Tigers on yesterday. I will talk about him a little later in the show in more depth about the latest in this recruitment with the Crimson Tide, but he's a guy to pay close attention to. 4-star wide receiver Shaz Preston is another guy who has LSU and the Crimson Tide loaded in his top 4 at the moment, so be sure to check out all of that over at touchdownalabama.com. But those are definitely three guys to pay attention to. Another guy I would say is Quincy Wiggins, a four-star defensive lineman out of Louisiana who has Alabama LSU in his top school list at the moment as well. But a guy I want to talk about a little bit more in detail today is Aaron Anderson, the four-star wide receiver out of Etna-Carr High School in New Orleans, Louisiana. Recently decommitted from the Tigers on yesterday, reopened his recruitment, and according to G Sports, who broke the news that Aaron Anderson has decommitted from the Tigers, he said that the Crimson Tide are probably the front runner in his recruitment. They have consistently recruited him. The Crimson Tide's defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, is leading the Tide's push for the four-star wide receiver. Of course, Golding has been successful with recruiting Louisiana prospects for the Crimson Tide. So Aaron Anderson, the four-star wide receiver, said that Alabama is probably the front runner in his recruitment. So we are sort of already seeing some of the results of LSU and Ed Orgeron choosing to depart and part ways at the end of this football season. So those are some of the things, some of the trends to pay attention to with that development coming out of the LSU program this week. But now I am going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about some of the guys who are slated to officially visit the University of Alabama this weekend when the Crimson Tide take on the Tennessee Vols in Bryant-Denny Stadium. One of those guys is the Crimson Tide commit in the 2022 recruiting class and four-star tight end Amari Black out of Florida. He committed to the Crimson Tide during the summer after the Crimson Tide had an opportunity to host him for an unofficial visit. Also had an opportunity to see him camp. The Crimson Tide were really impressed with his camp performance, put an offer in his hand. He quickly committed a couple of days later, and he has really had a successful senior season for Lakewood High School this year. You guys can check out his huddle film. You get an opportunity. He has really blossomed as a route runner, really blossomed as a tight end who can line out wide at the wide receiver position. As a matter of fact, I think that is the position where he spends the most time at, lining out wide. He is expected to be a versatile prospect for the Crimson Tide in the future, as he has experience lining up as an inline tight end and as an outside wide receiver, basically lining up all over the field because he sometimes lines up in the slot, runs the seam route a lot. Quarterback at Lakewood High School likes to hit him there. He also lines out wide, as I said, so he has really gaining a lot of experience playing all over the offensive side of the football this year. The Crimson Tide will also host one of the guys who they recently offered last month, and he is Isaiah Haston, a three-star defensive lineman out of the state of Florida. He's originally from Canada, but he transferred to Florida to play football this season and to improve his recruitment opportunities most likely. And when you take a look at Haston's recruitment, his recruitment has exploded over the last couple of months, picking up a lot of SEC offers. Recently took a visit to Oregon last weekend for an official visit, has visited Florida this year, plans to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend for his official visit. Had an opportunity to talk with them a little bit after he got an offer from the Crimson Tide. Said the offer came from the Crimson Tide's defensive line coach Freddie Roach, who was really impressed with the 6'4", 290-pounder. We had an opportunity to see him play in action this season. When we take a look at Haston, he also, as I said, he's a Canada product, so he has a lot of respect for the University of Alabama and the amount of Canadian athletes that they currently have at their university, including the Crimson Tide's current wide receiver, one of their starting wide receivers, and John Mechie. Said he has a lot of respect for Mechie, actually looks up to Mechie a little bit because they actually come from the same city, not just the same country. In his words, he said it means a lot more the fact that he actually is from Toronto, the same city that he is from as well. So Isaiah Haston will be on campus this weekend. I expect John Mechie to play a huge role in Haston's visit this weekend, so that is something to pay attention to with Haston's coming to Tuscaloosa. Another defensive lineman who will be inside Bryant-Denny Stadium and will be in Tuscaloosa throughout the weekend for his official visit is Chris Mcclellan, the four-star defensive lineman out of Oklahoma, will take his official visit this weekend after unofficially visiting the University of Alabama during the summer. Actually picked up an offer from the Crimson Tide during the summer as well. The offer came from the Crimson Tide's defensive back, Coach Jay Villa. He said he had been in contact with Coach Villa for a couple of weeks before that offer officially came. As I've said on the process a couple of times, this guy, he's a guy who has said he has been hungry for that Alabama offer. He's really surprised when it finally came because he felt that Alabama did not recruit a lot of defensive linemen from the state of Oklahoma. He said he felt really accomplished to get an offer from the Crimson Tide with him being a defensive lineman in Oklahoma. So the Crimson Tide had an opportunity to get him on campus during this weekend. He has been spreading a lot of information about his interest in the Crimson Tide. Basically, they send their top recruits, their top targets graphics all the time, and he's one of those prospects who posts those graphics constantly, so you know that the Crimson Tide are in contact with them consistently over the last couple of weeks. So this could be a huge visit for the Crimson Tide as they want to continue to add interior defensive linemen to their 2022 recruiting class. But that is what I wanted to talk about on today's show. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to hit that like button if you're not subscribed. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles. Get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue. Also get an opportunity to read our in-depth scouting reports for each Tide commit in each recruiting class. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device. Download the Touchdown Alabama app. If you are an Apple user, be sure to download the app in the Apple App Store. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.